Okay, hello and welcome. My name is Kathy Harshaw. I'm the Training and Events Manager here at the Marine Biological Association. And I'm happy to be joined today by Dr. Gill Brown, who's a graphic designer, a scientist, and also runs our scientific visual communication courses, both our Good Graphic Design course and our course on creating figures in Adobe Illustrator.
So as you say, I'm a scientist, or I used to be a scientist anyway. I did geology at university, and I worked as a geophysicist in exploration geophysics. I did for sort of 15, 16 years. I worked full time at that. During that time, I created a lot of PowerPoint presentations, went to conferences, stood in front of posters, did all the things that scientists do. Got very frustrated trying to draw figures in PowerPoint, as everybody does. And I'd always been interested really in art and design. You know, I'm the scientist who spent ages getting all the fonts lined up in the PowerPoint presentations and creating figures. And so I took a year out at that point and did a foundation course in art and design at Chelsea College of Art. Very useful. But it turned out I was more of a graphic designer than an artist, which I had no idea about at the time. So I stayed on at Chelsea and did a BA in graphic design, but I was still working at that point as a freelance geophysicist, so as a contractor, doing work there and working very much in technical support and on the job training I used to do. And when I finished the degree, I went back into the geophysics full time as a consultant and use my graphic design skills really to help me create training materials and that kind of thing, and realized that using Adobe software I could create much better figures and create much better material for the scientists. And I could see how much people were struggling just using PowerPoint to create figures and things. It is pretty frustrating. So I wanted to get back into graphic design really, and I did a part-time MA, this time at London College of Communication, which is part of the same university as Chelsea. And at that point was when I started specializing in scientific visual communication. And for my final project, I used my fellow geophysicists as guinea pigs and tried to teach them good graphic design, which really didn't work. You can't treat scientists as if they're graphic design students, I discovered, because they don't really care that much. But what they do care about is visualizing the science better communication of their science. That's what's important, not really what font they're using. And at the end of my master's, I was a little bit frustrated with that, but I was given the opportunity to do a full-time PhD, still at London College of Communication. So at that point, I gave up being a geophysicist. This was in 2015. I could finally give it up because I was fully funded, fortunately, to do the PhD. And I looked again at scientific communication, visual communication, but this time coming at it from the science side, so not from the graphic design side. So, you know, how do scientists communicate with each other? What visual languages do they use? You know, how can a graphic designer help them if they can understand these visual languages? And if we created any good graphic design along the way, that would just be an unexpected bonus, really. That wasn't the plan of my PhD. And it was during my PhD also I started collaborating with some scientists, the neuroscientists at King's College in London, and working with them to come up with ways of better creating conceptual figures in particular, which are really difficult to create. And it was out of the collaboration with King's, with the neuroscientists there, that these workshops kind of developed and expanded from there, to the extent that they're applicable not just to neuroscientists, but really to any scientist really in any field. And obviously I'm from the earth sciences, so I bring that experience to bear as well in the work that I do. So that's how I've ended up working as a graphic designer now in Illustrator, but concentrating on the field of scientific visual communication and helping scientists, you know, with individual figures and information sheets of things, as well as running these workshops to help them design their own work and do their own visual communication as well.
So you've been running these courses now for a number of years with lots of different scientists. What sort of feedback have you had from them?
I think really the feedback is that these courses are great because they've never been offered this kind of help before. And certainly that was my experience as a scientist. You know, you're expected to produce figures, and now you're expected to produce things like graphical abstracts, which are like torture for scientists, I think. But you're not given any training. You're given, you know, PowerPoint and told to get on with it effectively. So having, you know, the information I give in the workshops just to give some basic understanding of small things they can do to their figures. They're not difficult things that I'm advocating in terms of the good graphic design workshop, but they really make a difference. You know, and I tried to show that, and I tried to show a lot, you know, all the examples I use are from the sciences to show what a difference it can make if they just spend a little bit of time thinking about, you know, lining things up and the space they're using and the colors they're using. So yeah, and I think they're surprised by how much difference it makes. I've certainly had that reaction.
Mm.
And they've also said, that everyone who's doing, scientific research who has to create these presentations and papers should have this kind of training, because it really has made a difference for them, and they find it really helpful. So that's always, always makes me feel good when I hear that, because, that's what ultimately I want to help scientists, because I know how tough it is.
Mm. Yeah, and we've already had you run courses for marine
Yeah,
biologists
yeah.
earlier last year, and the feedback that we got was fantastic across the board. And having sat in on one of the courses myself, yeah, it just the tips were amazing, and you showed it, I think, how simple it can be, but actually what a great impact some of those simple changes can make.
Yeah, I think that's the key. It's not difficult. It takes a little bit of extra time. But it makes the communication easier. People can read your work easier or understand your work more easily. And two, it makes you look more professional as well. It makes you,
Mm.
every scientist likes a good figure, a nice figure. You always get compliments if you've created a nice slide, and usually someone steals it and uses it. That's certainly what happened to slides I used to create. So, it's worthwhile. And if you're at a scientific conference, everyone notices if your presentation is a cut above, a bit better design. So I think that's good as well. But
Mm.
yeah, a little bit of extra effort, and it really makes a difference, definitely.
Mm. So I know you've talked a little bit about the courses already, but could you just tell us a little bit about, starting with a good graphic design course, what it is that people will learn?
So really that course is designed to be kind of a graphic design 101. So it really covers some of the absolute basics about graphic design, and starting with my top 5 tips, which I always give. And the first one is always keeping it simple, keep it simple. So it goes through these tips, and then we look in more detail at things like templates and grids to use in layouts, which can seem a bit overwhelming and confusing, or you're using your institution's layout, which you hate, and so ways of making the best use of these templates and getting the most out of them. And we talk a little bit about type and typography, but not much. It's really just to make people aware of some basic do's and don'ts. We don't go into huge detail about fonts, because generally scientists don't get a choice in the fonts they're using, probably just as well. So really, it's just more about making the work look professional and easy to read. Legibility is the key there. And
Mm.
then talking really more about color, and how to use it effectively. Because these days, we've got a huge array of colors at our disposal, and it is possible to go completely mad with your color palettes. So again, we talk about that, and then making the best use of color and how it can really help your communication.
Mm.
And then I kind of, at the end of that, I show a case study example. So really, it's a conceptual figure that was very typical from life sciences in this case. And what happens if you apply these top 5 tips? What happens if you look at how to make it simpler, how to make better use of color, the layout, that kind of thing, and just show what difference that makes without affecting any of the science. All the science is still there. That is the most important thing. But just taking on some graphic design ideas and guidelines really makes a difference to this figure. And certainly people are quite surprised by how much difference it can make. And then really just lots of examples from sciences to show, do's and don'ts, what works, what doesn't. So just to give people ideas of what they can do to their own work, the kind of figures they produce, or the slides or posters they produce, what they could do to make them work more effectively, communicate more effectively, which is really what we're after. So,
Mm.
so yeah, so that's all covered in that.
And we offer, although the courses are standalone, and you can do one or you can do the
Mm.
other, we also offer them together. So could you tell us a little bit about the second course, the creating figures in Adobe Illustrator?
Sure. So the second course really zooms in on creating more conceptual figures, I would say. There's no reason why you can't create things like data figures and in infographics and whatever you in Illustrator, but it's really designed for drawing those little fiddly biological things and anatomical things that are incredibly difficult to draw in PowerPoint. Drawing anything with
Mm.
curves in PowerPoint is a bit of a non-starter. So if you wanted to draw, I think one of the examples I use in the course is a squid or cuttlefish. I'm not sure how you would draw that in PowerPoint, to be honest, with great difficulty, I'm guessing. So one, it's software that allows you to draw these things quite simply, but more importantly, in Adobe Illustrator, it can allow you to create figures that are very adaptable, because the figures are
Mm.
made up with lots of layers. So if anyone's used Photoshop, they may know there's lots of layers in Adobe Photoshop as well. And that means it makes them very easily to edit and adapt. So really, it's how to draw one of these figures from scratch with help from a resource like a photograph or something that you may have, and then how to make that figure easily adaptable. So you could use it in lots of different scenarios. So you could have a squid that's either very detailed and all color, or you could easily change it into a squid that's just an outline, a simple outline, without having to redraw everything every time. So Adobe Illustrator really give people an idea of how it works if they've never used it before, how to make most use of all the layers, and really how to draw a figure from scratch, because that's usually the question I get asked most of all. How do you draw it from scratch? Because they assume that illustrators think things about their heads. So it's how to use reference material to help you, and how to build up a figure starting from nothing into something that you can then use and adapt and grow and add details to, and from there. So hopefully when people come along to that course, they'll leave it with an idea of how Illustrator works, and with a methodology for how to create figures for themselves. I think that's the most important thing. It's all very well explaining how the tools work, but then it's, well, okay, but then how do I go about creating a figure? So really, we do concentrate on that.
Good to know, because I think people, you sometimes think you maybe have to be arty, you have to know how to start creating that. So it's great to know that there's that focus as well, as to actually, if I've got a squid, where do I start with that?
I think that's the most important, because there's lots of guides to Illustrator online, obviously, but they're all designed for illustrators. They're not designed for scientists who want to create a very particular type of figure. Because you find that in a particular field, you're going to be drawing the same thing again and again. If you work for a marine biologist on a particular type of zooplankton, you're going to be producing a little drawing of that. But you want to use it in lots of different scenarios, and so having it drawn up in Illustrator in a way that you can easily edit it, just makes it so much more useful. So I think people are quite sort of surprised by that. And people are put off from Illustrator because it looks so complicated. If you open the software, you just say, blimey, look at all the tools. So really, we concentrate on the basic tools that are used. You can pretty much draw anything. I only use the basic tools in Illustrator to draw the illustrations, and I think people are surprised what they can do with just a pen tool and some layers and a little bit of patience and some practice. And yeah, it gets them a long way. So I think that's good. I think it gives people the confidence to think, okay, I could actually use Illustrator. I think that's the key. If I practice a bit more, I can draw what I need to draw here.
So can you tell us a little bit about why it's important for scientists to communicate their work using illustrations rather than just using words or graphs or anything else?
Yeah, I think visual communication, it just adds so much to what you're trying to explain. Something you might spend a page of text trying to explain something that you could just show in a diagram, provided you can draw that diagram, obviously, or it will add to the text as well, and just make things a lot clearer. And I think that's particularly important if you're trying to communicate your science not to your peer group, but to either someone outside in another field or to a non-scientist. And I think that becomes incredibly important. And that's when images can really help. I've worked with scientists to help them create information sheets for patients or people in research study groups, and being able to add some images. One, it makes the whole thing look a bit less scary if there's some nice pictures in there. It's not just mounds of text, but also it really helps to explain things. And now, obviously, as I say, scientists need to be able to create graphical abstracts and that kind of thing for papers. Then yes, you need to learn how to marry up text and image to best explain your science. So it's becoming increasingly important, I think, now that scientists can visually communicate their work as well as describe it in words, especially because the words can be very technical, and there's a lot of acronyms and other things which are difficult to understand, whereas an image can cut through all of that and show it much more easily, I think.
So it's becoming increasingly important for scientists to be able to communicate their science to a more general audience, to the public. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think especially in this day and age, because there is so much misinformation or disinformation out there, on the internet, people are looking for information and maybe are not looking in the right place. And scientific research has a reputation, I guess, for being very difficult to understand, and it's all, uses long words, lots of acronyms, uses specific visual languages as well, which nobody really understands, and these very complex diagrams. And to try and simplify that so that people can go on to understand it is really quite difficult. Having worked with scientists to try and do that, it takes a lot of effort on the part of the scientists and also on the part of any graphic designers or illustrators working with them. One, to simplify it enough so that a layperson can understand, but to not simplify it so much that the accuracy of the science is lost, or people don't understand it correctly or misinterpret it, and that's a really difficult balance to get. But it's one that I think we're going to have to work much harder to achieve, so that people, that the lay people can understand this science, which is quite complicated, but it's important, and this information needs to be more widely available, I think, in this day and age. And so scientists will have to sort of spend time, I think, learning some skills, and hopefully, with the workshops a little bit, this will help them communicate more easily, communicate better, think more about how they're presenting their work, not just to their peers, but also to a wider audience, I think is really important.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Gill, for taking the time to talk to us today. We're really excited to be able to be running these courses again soon, and hoping that we'll have lots of people join you on them.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. It's been great to talk about this, and yeah, I look forward to the workshops.